start. And this session is very, very interesting because look, all the conference is about digitalization of nonprofits, like, all this new age which we came to. And the first this talk today, Julie Gerstad, she's a director of mentorship and student development, University of Connecticut, and at the same time Worth Institute for Entrepreneurship and Innovation. She's from United States, and she will talk us about the influence of the COVID-19 for digitalization nonprofit sector. And you guys can chat, put the questions in the chat on the right in English, or ask them after she finishes. So Julia, please, we're eager to listen.
Great, awesome. Thanks, Sasha, for inviting me. I will put on my PowerPoint, but again, as Sasha said, please feel free to use the chat box. I'm going to try not to speak for the entire 15 minutes so we can have more of a conversation and a dialogue. So, give me a thumbs up, Sasha, if you can see my PowerPoint.
Yeah, we can see it.
Awesome.
It's not full screen though, so maybe you'd like to...
I'm working on that. There we go. Good. All right. So as Sasha said, I am the director of student development with an entrepreneurship institute within the School of, actually we report right to the provost, but with UConn. I'm approaching this conversation today twofold. So as my role with the institute, but because Sasha asked me to speak a little bit more about the NGO space, I also am a development committee member for an organization called Elevate Youth. So I'll probably be talking from both sides of that perspective. And I just want to let you know, I've actually been to Russia. Sasha invited me in 2018. I had a wonderful time in both Moscow and St. Petersburg, and Russia is always in my heart. So I'm very excited to be here today with you all. So like many, organizations are facing problems due to COVID in regards to fundraising, external relations, and recruitment because of the lack of in-person events as a result to COVID-19. So the points that I want to focus on today are how are organizations rebuilding and retaining current board members and volunteers? What are we doing in terms of recruitment? How are we applying some of our best practices in social media? And what are some of the virtual events looking like in our spaces? I don't speak for organizations across the US. I'm just speaking for some that are happening at the higher ed level, as well as an NGO that's located in Boston, Massachusetts. So in terms of where we stand, so in March with Elevate Youth, we decided that it was going to be at that time a few months of rebuilding with current board members. So we reached out and we started to create some subcommittees and ways in which they can be involved within the organization that they typically might not have been. We saw that people had more time on their hands, that they wanted to be engaged and interactive with the organization. So we asked them to work on things like evaluating the website. And that's normally not a tool that we would have most board members do, but we came together and we looked at the website and we evaluated it. And then you'll hear later about a fellowship that we created. We had a student actually help us get involved and change up the website. So bringing community together through tasks, asking them to write job descriptions for individuals that we wanted to hire in the future, or working on some of our strategic planning initiatives. Were just some ways that we got our board members and development committee members involved in a virtual space. Some of the recruitment, I've given a few presentations and I just say that's got to be really easy for them. And so for me during COVID, one of my positions is to recruit as many mentors pretty much as possible. I have a goal of 20 to 30 volunteers every month to onboard. The program that I run is a virtual mentor program that was to happen before COVID, but it actually made the learning curve a heck of a lot easier because students really knew at that point how to use Zoom, and mentors at this time had more availability. So for me, I was getting inundated with how do I set up all these meetings? I didn't have a staff, or I couldn't go to somebody to say, hey, I need to meet with Sasha or Dennis or Alexandra. I use this tool called Calendly, and I think that it works globally. What happens is you can just open up your own calendar, and individuals can click through to set meetings. So that really helps me on the recruitment end. We took a stab at asking current mentors to help us with recruitment of mentors, opening up their networks. Instead of meeting face to face, we just had we still are conducting all of our interviews virtually. And I really started to work with a lot of the different university partners. This could be different in Russia, but for our department, we are trying to raise funds and attain grants. And we do that through our word of mouth, but we also do that through working with a development committee. I see a question. Should I stop? Yep.
Yeah, Julia, we have the same slide. Didn't you forget to move it forward?
Nope, I'm still talking about the same thing.
Okay,
so.
all right. Sorry to interrupt you. Okay.
Yep. It's point number 3. So university departments. And then the other part that I want to talk about is, I would have probably structured this conversation a lot differently. And it would have been about how much I use and rely on LinkedIn for new donor and volunteer engagement. But I'm aware of the culture, and I'm aware that in Russia that LinkedIn isn't used as predominantly in the country. So I won't talk about that, but I will just highlight that I do a lot of work by recruiting volunteers through searches on LinkedIn and connecting with them.
Wait. I still have a slide with your name on it.
What?
Number 1.
No, mine have all.
Okay, let me see. Let me ask other guys.
Slide 1, that's all I see. I see her name.
See?
Okay,
Yeah,
well,
me
we're just
too.
going to go with it because I only have 15 minutes, and I don't know.
Okay, that's okay. It's okay. We'll give you additional time. Just let's fix it. Can you, why? So I guess you move your presentation, right? But we don't have it. We still have slide number 1.
Yeah, and I'm moving through it, and it's not working. So
yeah,
it's
let's
that I'm
see.
sharing my screen.
Wait a minute. Let me ask. Настя, вы не знаете, что мы можем сделать?
Попробовать перезапустить, если только.
Ага. Julie, maybe you
Сейчас,
can just,
сейчас я могу. Да, еще раз.
And then start it over, your PowerPoint. And we'll see, maybe this time it will work.
Yes.
Aha. Now we have problem.
Right. So we talked about the problem.
I mean, problem as a slide. We don't have problem.
No problem now. So talked about the problem.
Okay.
Shoot.
Okay.
We talked about recruitment. So looking at LinkedIn as my primary tool. And then I was about to talk about social media. So what I found out is personal emails are the way to get volunteers and board members engaged. So just a quick example, somebody had given me probably a targeted list of over 50 mentors. And I sent them out a letter that said, hey, become interested in becoming a mentor. I sent that out twice, and I didn't put anybody's name in the subject line or like the to line. I just blasted it out. I didn't get any response. The third time I said, let me just try this one more time. And that's a really important point to make, is that because we're inundated with so many emails, I don't stop recruitment until somebody tells me no. So if I don't hear back from somebody, I'm still asking them. So on that third ask, I changed the subject line in my email, and I wrote the individual's name in that email, in that line, and then I said to, for example, Sasha. And guess what? My response rate came up. I probably out of a of an email ask of 50, I probably then obtained 10 mentors. And I think that this is the barrier. People get too used to sending something out, they don't hear back, they move on. But I want to tell you that the more organized you can be and the more intentional, you're going to pick up more people to become volunteers, board members, and help with your engagement. We've used Instagram and Strava. So Strava is a platform for individuals that are enthusiasts in running and in biking. And the organization, the outdoor organization I worked with, had a virtual fundraising event that raised over $10,000 by coming up with an event that just asked individuals to get outdoors. And so they had 1 week to do as many outdoor activities as they wanted. It could have been biking, it could be hiking, whatever they felt like they wanted to do. And they went on and used the Strava platform to talk about it in a community setting, and then also post about it on Instagram by using a unique hashtag. And this was Get Outdoors. And I think that in this day and age, being able to be creative and being able to be flexible is really what achieves good fundraising dollars and events. This is a movement because typically we have a lot of events that are fundraisers for marathons, for sporting events. This concept really tied in well with the mission of the organization, which is an outdoor organization. And we just found a different way to be able to keep people together, but yet we stay far apart, right? And safe. The last part I have is just to talk about some of our virtual events. So to create community, I've been throwing out the word informal mixers, and it's just another way to get people online and talking about the organization. So with the mentors that I work with, I bring them online at noon on Fridays, and it's kind of, we call it a no agenda event. And so we just ask the mentors to kind of share about what they're doing. It provides a space of community and connectivity. And for the student side, we have been connecting with various thought leaders. We use the angle of the university, and the alumni are some of our greatest people to bring in to speak with the students. So twice a week, I have events with the students, and where we connect them via Zoom with different thought leaders. And I want to be really intentional about speaking about the makeup of this event. So instead of focusing on numbers, and I think sometimes pre-COVID, we were so focused, like we've got to get 100 people to this event. The numbers speak for the success. And what we're seeing is quality matters over quantity with these smaller groups. So our goal is 7 to 10 students to come online to speak with a seasoned leader that has connected to UConn, to the university. So it provides an opportunity for students to actually engage and speak with the leader. If you get numbers that are over 15, 20, or 30, from our experience, students aren't going to engage in the conversation, and the presenter will fall flat because they don't have as much information sharing. So creating these spaces has been really positive, and I believe that this is a pipeline to donor engagement. So we get the students involved, we get the mentor involved, they have a good experience, and then possibly down the road, then we can ask for scholarship money. That's kind of our go. And then the next part is with virtual events. So at the end of the event that I was just speaking about, with the outdoor event where individuals pick their own opportunity to go outside, we hosted a 1 hour gala, I guess you would say, online, and everyone came online. They talked about what they did. We showed pictures, we had clips, we had a guest speaker come in, individuals that signed up for this event. the virtual fundraising, the Get Outdoors event, they're entered in raffles. So we were able to give out raffles and prizes, but we kept it short. And so because Zoom fatigue is real, we kept the event to 1 hour. And then we also asked for specifics. So we hosted another fundraiser where we asked people to donate $125 to fill backpacks that had art supplies in them, and had the opportunities for students to make nature kits, again going with the outdoor theme of this organization, and that helped raise funds for these backpacks that we distributed out into the community for students. And another example of, not having a fundraiser or a gala, what else can we do to quantify different positions? We had 2 young people that didn't have jobs this summer, and I wanted them to be able to make some money before they went off to college. And so we created a summer fellowship. And so being able to create opportunities such as a fund a cause, a scholarship, versus if you're live at an event and in the States, we have, some of those sexier items like a trip to Africa that you would bid on, instead not rallying around or not giving to an experience that the individual might go on, but instead the individual would contribute to something that was worthwhile and tangible in the organization. So that's my 15 minutes. I know it was fast, so I think that it's actually better to just kind of have a conversation instead.
Yeah, thank you very much. And we have some questions in chat. The first one was from me, and it's let me ask you in oral form. It's, look, nonprofits are mission driven, right? NGOs. So
Right.
when digitalization, whatever was named, will it kill the value, like mission vision value, right? Because it's more formal and like there's no heart, no passion, or it like the positive effect of digitalization is so big, so it overlaps it and it doesn't make any harm?
That's a good question.
Yeah, we don't have an answer in Russia as well, but it's interesting to see how you guys overseas, look at this. We will ask the same Dennis, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we hope that this isn't something that's going to go on forever, and we just have to keep the positivity and really just create those band-aid solutions, like those workarounds for the time, being able to showcase the work. And for us, for the work that I do, it's really about supporting the students. So how can we support them? And for us, it's making those connections, and I think that's the importance of it. So when you get down to mission, we're moving online for our work, and we're providing those smaller experiences. So I think the more that you can emulate those connections and experiences, that's how we'll get beyond this.
Okay, thank you. I see. Can you see the chat box, or should I read it to you, or you can read it yourself?
I can see it.
Okay, there are 2 more.
Yep.
Everybody can read it, or should we read it so everybody can?
Yeah, read out loud so I can. Anna, why don't you ask this to me? Can you, like, where were your question about? You wanted me to talk about online volunteer engagement and hashtags. So recruitment seems to be it's a creative process, sure. Okay, the question that Anna has asked is it easier to recruit online or offline? I think that's two approaches. So when I look at recruiting students, it's hard. They're just really there's so many competing messages from professors, and it would have been a lot easier for me in our campus to go outside or to set up a table in a hallway to speak with students. So that's hard. But on the other side, recruiting volunteers for me, it's an easy ask. Like, all I have to do is get in front of a screen and have a conversation with them, and they're excited to participate. So I think that we're getting a really good turnout right now of external board members and volunteers, but the subject side of it, that's more difficult.
Okay, thank you. One more from Anastasia.
Yeah. Which of the consequences of COVID-19 of NGO development are temporary and will continue over the COVID era?
Maybe it's not end, it's for.
Or
is it temporary or will continue?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think cutting things down, like I think if we can find ways, for example, when I talked about the scholarships for the students versus having somebody show up for a 1-hour cocktail party or these galas, I think we were seeing gala fatigue already, and that people don't want to donate money to have a rubber chicken dinner, that the spending can be small, the events can be smaller. So I think that smaller events will be a result of COVID-19, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Absolutely.
This is very interesting to see how people, like, you know, it's overseas, right? It's a different world at US. So it's very interesting to see how they see it, right? All this cavitation and with nonprofits. And so thank you, Julia. And we will move to Dennis. And Dennis is, he works in Columbia College, Chicago. It's Dennis Rich. We know him very well. He have been in our meetings and whatever conferences in the previous time. And so Dennis will talk about this COVID-19 in digitalization of nonprofits in art and culture. So Dennis, you have your, you turn on your microphone, your mic, it's off.
Anastasia has my PowerPoint, so she will put it up.
Okay, all right. Yeah, it's in progress. Okay.
Thank you. Now, I'm perfectly happy to have people put questions up in chat, as well as do it at the end, so we'll see how it goes. First slide, please. Okay, so what I'm looking at here is the transformation of the arts and cultural organizations during this pandemic. Unlike Julie, I'm not working in a single organization. I was running an arts management program at a university. Before that, I worked broadly in the field of the arts, mostly in the performing arts, theater, ballet, symphony orchestra. So I've got a broad background, and I've been monitoring how arts have been affected in the United States by this pandemic. So here we go. Whoops, no, back one. So the pandemic has obviously transformed the work of arts and cultural organizations. Many nonprofit museums, theaters, concert halls were closed to the public and have had to develop new forms of activity to stay in business. Let me add to that many of them are still closed, although we're beginning to see some reopening. What complicates this in the United States is that we do not have a coherent policy about the pandemic and about this disease. And so each state is managing it differently. And this has been a problem. There is a high rate of unemployment among artists and arts workers. However, with the development of, I'm missing a piece here. Can we go to the next slide? With the development of new technologies, there have come new activities. Among these, online guided tours, distant lectures, Zoom meetings with curators, internet theater performances, live virtual concerts. So the arts have tried very hard to continue to be the arts, to continue to interact with audience, but to do it safely. Next slide, please. So the other thing I should point out is that traditional funding sources are being replaced or augmented with e-commerce and crowdfunding. In the United States, such new approaches are meeting the challenges of COVID-19. Next slide, please. So the worldwide pandemic was declared in March. In July, museums across the United States had been affected. And according to the American Alliance of Museums, most museums, by the way, I'm going to do museums and then performing arts. Most museums reported extreme financial distress. Next slide, please. A little bit more about museums then. 1/3 of museums reported they were not confident they would be able to survive for 16 months without additional financial relief. 16% of museum directors indicated their institution was at risk of permanent closure. Side note, some museums have indeed closed. Most of the museums have furloughed or laid off a portion of their staff. Many anticipated reopening under controlled circumstances with reduced staff. Next slide, please. While we're looking at that slide, I will point out that as museums are beginning to reopen, what directors predicted has indeed happened. So, questions related to reopening museums were how to avoid crowds, how to regulate entrance, and how to keep social distance in lines and exhibits. Now, you've all been to art museums, and you know how people crowd around a single painting or single sculpture. So how to maintain social distance and still allow people to view the artwork in real place, not virtually, is one of the issues that they've been dealing with. A key issue in deciding to reopen is the rate of infection in a particular city or area. And as I pointed out a moment ago, because we do not have a national policy on this, these decisions are being made state by state, city by city, area by area. In some cases, frankly, with disastrous results, because states have said we have to maintain the economy, so they've opened everything, and we're now in a third wave of infection. So as late as September 2020, many museums have addressed the question of how to operate and how to view exhibits. Here we are in October. Next slide, please. And here are some examples. San Francisco Museum of Modern Art announced furloughs for its full and part-time employees on August 28th, 2020. On September 17th, they announced a reopening beginning on October 1st for members, October 4th for the general public. Now, the museum has adopted something called time ticketing. So in essence, you have to make a reservation to come into the museum. They've limited their capacity to 25% of normal capacity. So it's now possible to visit the museum under limited circumstances. Other COVID measures are also in place, including social distancing, masks required for all visitors, and visitors are encouraged to reserve an admission time to avoid being turned away. If I could have the next slide, please. So, isolation caused by by the COVID-19 pandemic is not over. And many museums have tried to adapt and serve their communities in new ways. So here are some new offerings: free online learning resources, access to their collections digitally, virtual tours, online exhibits are all invaluable opportunities to educate and connect people across the nation and across the world. An example, the Smithsonian Institution is providing a virtual gallery tours of its museums, educational resources, and webcasts. The Chicago Art Institute offers a virtual visit to most of its displayed collection. So it is now possible to visit the museum sitting at home, as we are sitting in our various homes right now. If I could have the next slide, please. Google Street View, which is an online service, now allows visitors to tour the Guggenheim's famous spiral staircase without ever leaving home. And from there, they can view works of art from Impressionist, Post-Impressionist, modern, and contemporary eras. Such practices become routine during the COVID-19 era. I mean, obviously, I can't list every single museum that's doing something, but this is becoming normal. An interesting question before I leave this slide is how much of this will continue to be normal as we return to so-called normal. Next slide, please. Still, museums are facing considerable challenges in revenue. in the face of long closings, limited reopening, and the reluctance of many people to go into closed spaces. This last point, reluctance of people, is an important one. The San Francisco Museum of Modern Art is now reopened. Most people are still saying, I'm not going there. Another major challenge is fundraising. And museums are responding with new fundraising challenges, including, like what Julie said, virtual events, online lectures, virtual membership. That's a new and interesting category, which provides interactive, content-rich ways to experience a museum remotely. Small museums have also reached out in a different way, doing homeschooling with parents and teachers and strengthening their social media profiles and experimenting with new technology. So what we're seeing is really kind of an interaction with the digital world, the virtual world, and the analog, the old world. I'll leave it at that and go to the next slide. So it's clear the challenge of survival for museums is being met with imagination. For years, museums have been seeking to transform their museums to the digital age. So the coronavirus has put that transformation front and center. So I think what I'm saying here is that some of what we're seeing was happening anyway. Some of what we're seeing was inevitable, but the process has been speeded up of necessity. Next slide, please. So while museums were forced to shut their physical doors this spring, they simultaneously enhanced their online offerings, creating new ways for the public to experience their collections. In fact, insiders and consultants, museums, according to insiders and consultants, museums are increasingly behaving almost like media production companies, seeking to tell the stories behind their collections. This will likely not change with the end of the pandemic. We'll see. All right, let's go on to the next one, please. Bear with me 1 second. Okay. I'm just making sure that no one's throwing questions that I'm not seeing. So now let's look at the performing arts. And the performing arts, the situation is more precarious. Museums have a stationary collection. It doesn't move. It can be viewed virtually. Performing arts, in fact, depend on the presence of an audience for the experience to be complete. It's not possible to do timed admission for theater or symphony performance. And seating people, even at some distance in a closed facility, does not guarantee safety. More and more, we're discovering that the so-called 2-meter distance between people maybe isn't enough. And that closed spaces, by virtue of being closed, are dangerous. So this is the new reality for the performing arts. Next slide, please. Across the country, artists and people who run performances are pondering how a new normal might look. Here's one. A California-based promoter, David Shaw, is considering such radical ideas, and he's done this, as presenting live shows at drive-in movie theaters or shuttered minor league baseball parks. The idea, I think, of drive-in movie theaters and a concert is an interesting contrast, because we don't think of drive-in movie theaters as something that a typical concert goer or theater goer would go to. Here we are in a new world. It's unclear whether people will attend such performances. It's clear that at this time of the pandemic, most likely for some time afterwards, performing arts are going to be different than they have been in the past. Next slide, please. So we now have theater and symphony orchestras. How has theater and symphony orchestras managed to continue? And some examples. Hang on a second. I'm just looking what oh, Drew's asking if there are drive-in theaters in Russia. I don't know the answer to that question. Are there drive-in theaters in Russia?
Yes.
Okay, so yes, so this could be done in Russia as well. Anyway, so Actors Theater of Louisville, a mid-sized company with an annual budget of $9 million, canceled its annual new play, Humana Festival of 6 plays, and shifted instead to what they're calling a transmedia approach. By the way, the Humana Festival is internationally famous. For them to cancel it is a big deal. So this approach uses emergent technologies and digital platforms to reach new audiences. The executive director reports, we now have radio plays, we have video capture plays, And the genres range from classical work that might even be animated work that includes concert-like musicals. So not only is the theater switching from the analog to the digital world, it's also changing the very definition of the art form as they do it. Next slide, please. Goodman Theater Chicago canceled most of its regular season, but this is analog technology, is performing a play called Fannie Lou Hamer Speaks on It in public parks and other outdoor spaces where social distancing can be easily practiced. The company anticipates additional outdoor performances going into the autumn, so a safe non-digital approach to the challenge of the pandemic. Now, the Goodman theaters in Chicago, they can't keep doing this because winters in Chicago are brutal. They're worse than Russian winters. Playbill and Broadway Podcast Network have partnered a full schedule of upcoming live stream events during the current pandemic. In partnership, they're producing a calendar of theater events that are live streamed and presented on Zoom or uploaded to YouTube. Again, this interaction between the analog and the digital. Next slide, please. I'm almost done. The point here is that the American theater has found ways to stay connected with audiences that are safe and utilize contemporary technology. As with museums, it seems unlikely that the American theater will return to its previous pandemic form, when herd immunity is achieved through a vaccine. This, of course, remains to be seen. Next one, please. Here we go. Symphony orchestras have also had to cancel performances and find alternative ways of reaching audiences. I want to point out for symphony orchestras, this is a particularly difficult problem because using technology like Zoom involves lag time. So you're in fact hearing my voice a little bit later than I'm saying things. Well, imagine what that is like if you've got 30 musicians or 60 musicians trying to play together. We'll talk about that in a second. So the New York Symphony, led by music director Michael Repper, Youth Symphony, had canceled its concert at Carnegie Hall this spring. 71 members of the orchestra performed virtually from isolation points across the country to perform Mahler's Symphony No. 1, Titan. Next slide, please. Minnesota Orchestra is actually performing on stage with a smaller number of musicians distant from each other. However, there is no audience for these. The orchestra is performing 6 Friday night concerts live on stage. These began on October 2nd. The performances are available on live public television, live radio, on Classical Minnesota Public Radio, and live streamed at minnesotaorchestra.org. So bringing wide and easy access to classical music lovers. I'm just looking at the question here.
Yeah, we'll have some time.
Okay, it's a pop-up. I was looking for one. Let's go to the next slide, please. So an important issue that has made presenting live orchestral performances difficult is the lag time that occurs in virtual communication methods such as Zoom. I just mentioned that. There are now, however, a number of easy-to-use, low-latency remote recording platforms in existence. Generally, they need to run in the Chrome web browser. Such software has made possible concerts like the ones undertaken by the Minnesota Orchestra. So technology has assisted and has addressed this issue of lag time. So we can indeed do orchestra performances with musicians in 71 different locations and have the music sound together, no lag time. If I could have the next slide, please. So looking forward, despite successes in both theater and classical music, COVID-19 is continuing to grow across the United States. As a result, furloughs and permanent layoffs in theater and musical artists continue. It's increasingly difficult to envision the performing arts in the United States returning to previous normalcy in the near future. The structure of the arts and cultural industries leaves working artists and performers and related staff particularly vulnerable to catastrophes such as the current pandemic. And I should point out, by the way, people in the US in many businesses are returning to work, not in the performing arts. So this will continue for them for some time. I may have the next slide, please. As of May 4th, an ongoing survey conducted by Americans for the Arts revealed 2/3 of American artists are having trouble sourcing materials and finding employment. It's clear that arts venues will reopen later than most other businesses because social distancing is difficult, has already been observed here for both performers and audiences. Broadway theaters, which are not NGOs, but nevertheless, have indicated they will not reopen before January of 2021, perhaps later. The result is the vast majority of performing artists have lost some or most of their income, not to mention losing institutions that have in the past employed them. Next one, please. It's clear the coronavirus lockdown means people cannot participate in location-driven experiences, but consumer demand, I believe, will rebound when things stabilize. Location-based entertainment providers have worked to increase resilience by connecting with consumers in new ways, staying connected and giving people the promise of return. At the same time, venues and performing arts institutions are using technology to reduce the risk at their premises and improve people's experiences. One more, please. So the fundamental value proposition of location-based entertainment has not changed. For most industries, demand should return when the economy stabilizes and people feel safe. Those companies and institutions that have stayed engaged with consumers provide compelling reasons for them to return, deploy technology to mitigate health risks, and use data and analytics to address customer needs, will put themselves in the strongest position. The demand for live experiences will return, perhaps stronger than ever. Companies that plan now to mitigate health risks, sustain consumer engagement, and invest prudently will increase their resilience and their ability to best be able to serve customers over the long term. I think there's one more. The demand for live performance will return. I just said that. Well, when the nation and the world emerge from COVID, companies that plan now to mitigate health risks, sustain consumer engagement, utilize technology, and invest prudently will increase their resilience and the ability to best serve customers over the long term. So that's a big overview, ladies and gentlemen. Now I see there's a bunch of stuff here.
Yeah, there are at least two questions.
So here it says, how do you think the overall vector of the pandemic's impact? Are there any pitfalls that are not currently on the surface? Will the pandemic affect culture in general? Wow, who's asking that? That's a wonderful question.
Tatiana.
Tatiana, I think that's not only an excellent question, I think the reality is that normal will never be what we knew before. That when this is over, when there's a vaccine, when we arrive at herd immunity, there will still be, what I want to say, a pandemic mentality. I don't think that's going to go away. And a related example, if I might, my mother survived the Great Depression in Europe in the early part of the previous century. As a child, she was a young child and a young woman and went through this horrible economic crisis. She lived to be almost 100 years old. For the remainder of her life, that mentality was still in her head. Okay, I mean, my mother reused aluminum foil multiple times. She didn't have to, but it was this mentality. So the point I'm making is, I think the imprint of this crisis is going to be permanent. And I think it will affect the way the arts function. Will museums return? Yes. Will theater audiences return? Yes. Will there still be alternatives? I believe so. I'm reasonably certain that orchestra performances of the future may well be in the hall and virtually at the live streaming at the same time because of this new mentality. I hope I'm answering the question. Now there's another one here from Anna. Good point. Anna says, Anna or Anya, I'm not sure, but at any rate, amazed at the number of grants and government funding that came out. I think it looks better from a distance than it was in reality. Yes, some of that money did go to arts organizations. I prepared a longer paper, by the way, to be to accompany this presentation. And if anybody wants, I'll be happy to send them a copy with bibliography and some little more information. However, the huge funding that came has helped the arts, but in the main, it's helped two groups of arts organizations, rather different ones. Number one, large organizations have benefited. They're the ones, of course, who probably need the help least, but they have gotten the help to keep their employees and to maintain their budget. The second group that's gotten some fairly significant help have been what we would call diverse culture organizations, organizations run by Hispanic or African American, that are Hispanic or African American in focus, have gotten some special funding to not lose that cultural diversity. I could go on and on, but there's a short answer. So yes, I think this does help us recover. It's not nearly enough.
Yeah, thank you. There's one more.
Okay. Oh, here, from Maria.
Mm-hmm.
Let me just read it. Thank you for, what do you think how long it will take for museums and the arts sphere to recover from COVID-19 consequences? I wish I had a crystal ball. Here's what I think. I think if we actually get a vaccine and we begin to develop herd immunity, and by this time next year, the general notion is it's safe. You can go to the grocery store, you can walk on the street, you don't need to wear a mask everywhere. Although I'm not sure that'll ever go away. I think it'll take another year, minimum, after we're told it's normal. It'll take another year minimum for people to say, okay, I will go to the theater, I will go to the orchestra, I will go to the museum. Side note, movie theaters are an exception. People who go to the cinema are a different mentality and a different kind of crazy. They're going to the movies now. They're nuts. But I think the recovery.
That means movie theaters still operating.
Some are. And again, because we have these different rules in different cities.
Okay, all right.
In some cities, they've said movie theaters can reopen at 25% capacity. A couple in Florida now are at 50% capacity. But I think that the traditional arts we're talking about here will take 1 year minimum after we're told it's safe for it to begin to look normal. That's
very interesting. Thank you very much.
I thank you all very much for the opportunity.
No, really, it's so, okay, there's one more.
Yep. You said, like, what about joint actions? So they did something together. I read the question. I'm just giving you a moment to think. The answer, who is this? I know this gentleman. The answer is yes, but not in the direction you think. Because it is fairly unusual for different art forms in the United States to say, let's do something collaboratively in terms of fundraising. I have seen, theater and dance companies collaborate on things, for example. But the idea of raising money collaboratively to address the problem has occurred from the other side. That is to say, for example, the San Francisco Arts Council has said, we got to do something. And so they're addressing the collective problem and trying to provide funding. And by the way, asking people to come together and address their needs. But I've not seen it yet come organically out of the arts community. So it's an excellent question and one I would love to see happen. But at this moment, I think people are still in the mode of panicking and trying to preserve themselves.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Julius. Thank you, Dennis. It's really exciting to see, different point of view, different, from overseas. Thank you. And guys, I think the session is over. And I'm sure.
No, you got one more.
I'm also going to speak.
Wow. Екатерина Леонидовна. Прошу прощения. Это самое у меня заявлено как один доклад. Екатерина Леонидовна, will you speak in English or Russian?
I don't know what is better in English. I think.
English. Go ahead.
English.
It's
Some
English
of us who don't
session.
speak Russian will be great.
But I have slides in Russian,
It's
so.
okay. We'll figure out.
You speak English
And
well.
I will ask Anastasia to download my slides. So I will talk about the Russian experience that is actually based on St. Petersburg and Leningrad Oblast Arts Organization. And please, next slide. And first of all, I would like to say about the some specific features of the product of non-profit organization in the arts and culture. So first of all, we have to think that they're all services and not just let's say regular services, but it's also very important to think about the value of the process of visiting the arts organization, to see the real arts objects, to see the art, to feel the atmosphere of these museums or theaters. So it's also part of the services. So and actually also real meetings with arts professionals, with curators, with musicians or actors are also very important and add some extra value comparing with the digital, let's say, or online services. Please, next slide. So if you look at the digital product of non-profit organization in the arts and culture, it includes, as Dennis mentioned, all kinds of online excursion, guided tour, virtual events, online meetings with curators, with musician, arts professional. Also, it could be online theater performances, online concerts, or opening of exhibition. So they're all actually some new forms of digital products of non-profit organization in Russia. Please, next slide. And what is very important for this topic, that the digital product is not the same as traditional product of non-profit organization in the arts and culture. And we can't speak that we can totally the traditional product, traditional services of cultural organization with a digital product. So please, the next slide. So the digital product can be some part of additional services, some part of the additional product that could be offered to the public by a non-profit organization. And it actually has also very important value in terms of marketing communication. So it's develop and support communication with the target audience that already exists for non-profit organization. At the same time, it allows to attract new audience that probably has not decided to visit arts organization, probably don't have enough money or other have some other restriction that stops them visiting arts organization. So basically, digital product is very easy for young people to try to make, let's say, the first try of such product, and basically it's create the demand. If we talk in economic term, it creates the demand for arts services, for arts product, and that's why it's very important. So please, the next slide. As I mentioned, so my presentation is based on the experience of St. Petersburg NGO dealing in the arts and culture, and also NGO that are working in Leningrad Oblast. So it's some kind of case, let's say, study that was made during the pandemic time. And what was found out during my research, that there are quite a lot of problems or challenges of digitalization for arts NGO in Russia, or let's say in St. Petersburg and Leningrad Oblast. That small organizations, small NGOs and Leningrad Oblast NGOs in the most cases don't have enough technical and staff possibilities and also financial, let's say, enough funding to implement the digitalization. So basically, they don't have enough resources to start the digitalization and to develop this kind of new activities. So next slide. Another challenge or problem, so that digitalization increase the expenses of non-profit organization. So that's why we're talking about new staff, new technical equipment that is necessary to start this digitalization process. Also, another problem is that decrease of income of non-profit organizations. So most of the online services that arts organizations are offered, they are free of charge. So basically, if we talk about traditional services like visiting museums or attending some concert performances, so usually they're not free, so people are paying for them. So they're buying tickets, so NGO can earn enough money, or let's say a certain amount of money for their budget. But digital services that were offered during the pandemic time, they could not raise any income. So in most of the cases, they were free of charge and did not solve the financial problems of non-profit organizations. So the next slide. And just to summarize what I found during the research, so I could say that the large organization, large NGO, like let's say Hermitage Museum, or if you talk about like Mariinsky theaters, of course they were quite successful in digitalization process. So so they offered many kinds of online guided tour, online performances. They were quite active in social media. So basically, for them it was quite a well-developed process. And part of it, part of this success, that they have started digitalization before the pandemic. And so they've already invested quite a lot of money, quite a lot of resources in the website, in the social media. They've already were quite widely presented in internet. And also, if we are not talking about large-scale NGO that are quite famous, but also some small NGO or media-sized NGO, who also that have also invested in advance a lot of resources in digitalization before the pandemic time. They also were quite successful during the pandemic time in the digitalization, because these forms were quite well developed before that time. And as I said, small NGO small NGOs that have not started these activities before could not raise enough resources and could not educate their staff to start digitalization and to develop new services for the public. So the next slide. Also digitalization, as I mentioned, does not solve the financial problem of NGO, and not only because of the free digital services that in most cases were offered for the public, but also that the public So the visitors now in Russia have quite limited budget, so demand on the services of arts organization are quite low, because it's not, let's say, the basics, the services, the products that people need first of all. So it's kind of entertainment, and the budget for the entertainment, not only in Russia but in other countries, decreased quite significantly. So basically, digitalization can solve these financial problems, as I mentioned. But what are the positive sides of digitalization is that fact that it's kind of a marketing tool that actually helps to work with a target audience. So we can still keep connection with our audience, even if we are closed for the public. So we still can communicate with their sponsors, with their members of arts organization. We can try to find a new target audience and try to create a demand for the new, let's say, services. And another important fact that actually electronic commerce, or let's say internet shops, that could be also used by arts organization to solve their financial problem, also can be solved through digitalization. So some NGOs started to open internet shops or use crowdfunding to raise extra money. So basically, it's also a positive, kind of a positive fact for Russian NGOs. So that's all. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ekaterina. Guys, do you have any questions? I see there's some comments, but it's not. There is a question from Anna.
Yes, Mariinsky Theaters, yes, does virtual performances, and Bolshoi Theater. Large scale, let's say, big museums and even concert hall, like big philharmonic, large philharmonic hall in St. Petersburg also has this virtual guided tour for the public. So if the building itself is also part of the value, part of the let's say, creative product. So so it also could be interesting for the public. So to see what is inside, what's the beautiful architecture inside, what if there is a lot of history behind that. So of course it would create extra value for that organization. They could tell some historical stories about this museum or theater or concert hall. And also question about small organization. What kind of support? Probably support if they can apply for some grant support, so they can ask grant for this technical, let's say, equipment, and also for maybe money for educational needs, that the staff can get some courses, some extra education, also to be able to use this technology. For some NGOs, if we have like not very young, let's say, staff, it's also a big challenge to use this all kinds of online resources, even if they're available in such an NGO. So basically, I think grants or maybe support from donors could be quite also efficient for them.
This is interesting that you think it's not, like this digital age doesn't help for, doesn't help to get financial support, because look, there's this CRM system like customer relationship manager, and a lot of nonprofits, a lot of NGOs started to use it. They transfer it to DRM, like donor relationship manager, and it helps them to get the, from private people, the donations. In the same time, all these crowdfunding platforms, like specifically Kickstarter, is for movie makers, right? And so it's more concentrated on art. And so it looks like it's vice versa. This new digitalization era, digitalization age opened a new world for nonprofits and in art as well. So it's very interesting that you think it doesn't help.
No, I think the crowdfunding right now is not working very well because people are restricted with the budget, so they can't donate very much, and a lot of projects that are registered on Planeta.ru platform or other what is another not Kickstarters, so some other platforms, Russian platform, Boomstarter. So they can't collect enough money on time. So basically they can open the project, declare it, but because of most of the people, let's say, don't have enough money right now, so they also have financial problems. So it's quite hard to collect and raise money through this platform.
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody wants to say anything? Or like we're done here? Vladimir Borisovich, может, вы хотите? Or anybody else?
Well, I think the presentations that we have seen and listened to are absolutely excellent. Of course, the phenomena that are under research are quite new. In particular, the consequences of the pandemic, which perforce speeded up digitalization in the third sector, including non-profit organizations in the arts and culture. And of course, it is very interesting to see, the first results of the analysis of this new material, and I would say what our colleagues presented are, on the one hand, results of the analysis, but on the other hand, they are forecasts, they are hypotheses, and yes, let's see what will happen. Well, I myself, I do not like the talk about the new normalcy. I hope the normalcy will return after some time, and I agree with Professor Ridge in his forecast that yes, it will take some time, but some basic practices, some basic behavioral patterns of the audience of non-profits in the arts and the culture will return. However, it remains to be seen what out of this broad range of crisis measures will survive the crisis. Let's see. You see, for example, I would say that virtual online museum tours will certainly survive because they give extra value to the clients of this service. And any other new activities will probably survive too. So let's live long enough to see what's going to happen. I wish everyone good health, and dear colleagues, please be careful. Although I do not believe that the so-called second wave of the crisis is as dramatic as it is being described in the media and by many governments around the world, let's stay on the safe side. Let's be careful.
Thank you very much. Very optimistic view. I think it's great. Yeah. So thank you, everybody. If we don't have any more questions for our speakers, let's say goodbye to everybody and stay healthy, happy, and optimistic as Vladimir Borisovich told us to be. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Goodbye. Thank you.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you, United States. We are very glad to see you, and thank you for answer to us.